you ever think, I like hearing how God works in other people's lives, but I don't think anyone would be interested in hearing my story with or without God? I mean, I've messed up. You might be thinking, I keep messing up. That's me. How can I be sure God still wants to use me? Today we have Amanda Schaefer, podcaster, Bible teacher, and author of Holy Plot Twists, one of her many books. God is still writing your story. Welcome, Amanda. Tell us where you're from and a little bit about your family, please.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. I am from Pennsylvania, a lovely suburb near Philadelphia. I'm in a 1600s farmhouse and just really enjoy where I live. My family, currently, I have a son and a daughter. My daughter is married, so I also have a son-in-law. And then I have my dad, who I take care of. I've been his caregiver for 6 years on Easter. Started caring for both my parents during the pandemic. Mom passed away 2 years ago. So I am caring for my father, who will be 96 in August. And they're my family that's near.
How did you get a 1600s farmhouse? That's amazing.
Well, this is the house that I grew up in. So I grew up in this home. I moved away, got married again, accepted Jesus, had a family, and I came back to take care of my parents. They didn't want to leave here. So here I am. God redeemed me back to the place where I grew up.
And hopefully the foundation or the walls have been redeemed and that you have indoor plumbing after 1600.
We do. There have been additions all along, and they made an addition 20 years ago so they could stay.
Oh,
But it has so much character,
oh, much
walk-in
character.
fireplaces and all the things. Yeah.
Wonderful. That's so great. Um, you say that your calling is to tell God's story. I mean, what does that mean? Don't we already have God's story in 66 books of the Bible?
We do, but we also have it in every one of his children out there breathing, and everyone who was ever born, and everyone is going to be born, because he is father to all of us. And he is constantly writing and sharing stories through what's happened in our lives so that we can carry his story. And God is always doing a new thing, and he is way bigger than we can imagine. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of times we feel like we know everything about God, but even in eternity, he's going to be surprising us with new things.
Mhm. Have you come across a surprising thing about God recently?
Surprising. I think he consistently surprises me most when I am down on myself about something and he interrupts me to tell me how much he loves me and that I'm actually doing a great job. He
Mm.
sees it differently. And that fatherly love that he shows me always takes me by surprise. I had great parents, but they had their dysfunction, and that unconditional encouragement and closeness is always just so beautiful.
Mhm. Yeah, I talked to a friend just this week who I've known her for years. We don't get together that often, but she just expressed some internal shame.
Mhm.
And I like to say that shame is from the pit, and we are not pit people. And
That's right.
that's why we have Good Friday is tonight. I'm not sure when this is going to go out, but
Mhm.
that's what that's why we know we don't have to have shame. I do have conviction, though. I think the Holy Spirit's good at that. But
Absolutely.
the fact that you have that you still continue with, hey, oh, by the way, God still loves me and I'm going to be okay, is ongoing. I think it's an ongoing thing, and it's
Mhm.
nothing to be flip about. In fact, I think part of my maturity in Christ, Amanda, is valuing his love even more, you know.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, growing along with it. And here's the thing, I always think of Psalm 3:3, where he says, "I'm a shield about you and the lifter of your head." And so I had a lot of shame in my life, in my early part of my story before I met Jesus. And when I hear that, I picture Jesus sitting across from me and reaching out. When you're in shame, your chin is down, you're looking at the ground, and he reaches out and he takes your chin and he raises it so that your eyes meet his. And that's who he is. That's what I find he surprises me with.
Mm, so great. Did someone tell you that you were a storyteller? I had someone tell me that, interestingly enough, about 10 years ago. And I don't know why it startled me because I'm always talking. And talking and good talking usually involves story, as you know, but it made
Mhm.
me not necessarily feel good. It made me feel like, oh, I am called to tell stories.
Mhm.
And my mother was a great storyteller. We didn't always want to hear the same ones over and over, but that's because we were not very patient. But did someone tell you you were a storyteller, or how did you become aware of it?
I've just always been doing it. I think my parents did encourage me greatly when I was young. They encouraged my creativity and all the ways I told stories. Some other things maybe were a little more dysfunctional, but in that area, they really, really did an excellent job. I still have the very first book I think I ever wrote. It's stapled together with colored paper on the outside, and you know, I wrote the story and drew the pictures. I was constantly climbing up on furniture and sharing new plays that I had made. And I was always outside noticing.
Hmm.
I'm a noticer, especially in creation. And so I would bring in the things that I found when I was out playing, and I would talk about how wonderful they were. I remember just fully feeling engaged and myself.
Hmm.
When I allow myself to really enjoy something, I'm a very visual, creative person. I paint and I take photography, and in addition to writing. So I think I tell stories in lots of different ways.
Mhm.
And yeah, I've had a lot of people tell me, but I think I've just been able to notice it on my own. I've always validated that that was something that I did well.
Wow. That is such a gift that God has given you, not just the creativity, because we're all creative in some way because we're made in his image, but the internal knowledge, especially since you had some deep struggles. I think when
Mhm.
we can hang on to one good thing that we know we're good at, it can
Yeah,
help us when we're
yeah.
feeling discouraged, because of course we naturally get discouraged because this life is hard. You said
Mhm.
that you knew you wanted to be a writer and a speaker early on, but that you also knew that you didn't have a powerful story to share. Does that
Mhm.
mean that our stories have to be powerful to share? And what does that mean to the person who may be listening today who thinks their story is very small compared to the spiritual giants of old?
Okay. Well,
Big question.
all I've done for the past 5 years is help people share their stories, help them see that their story is valuable, precious, and one of a kind. So, what I meant at that time was that I did not have anything that I saw as valuable to share because I did not yet know Jesus. Now, my parents still sent me to NYU. I still got all of the training. I still did all the things. God gave me everything I needed for when I would accept him later. But the stories that I shared, yes, I think they were good, but they didn't have the deep life giving value that I get to talk about now. When I share now, I'm always sharing God in every part. Even the difficult, even the broken, even the parts we don't want to look at. And I'm able to show his character and his goodness, and he'll take things and he'll make them somehow usable, somehow better, and somehow something that will give a big, powerful kingdom impact. I think every story is powerful. I just didn't understand that Jesus being in my story was going to really transform everything about me and bring back out those things God had actually deposited in me on purpose. I
Hmm.
think we all are given certain talents and certain ways that we lean. I think when we go back to the beginning, we can pull those threads and see those themes, and we can see the things that God has purposefully put in there in addition to the things that the world kind of did to us. Those are things that he didn't intend for us, but he is able to put it all together. So I use a kintsugi bowl. I don't know if you can see that on the front of my cover, because I think that's God's specialty, right? He takes the broken shards. If you drop something, you pick everything up, you scour the floor, and you make sure you get every piece so no one gets hurt, and then you put it in the trash can. But that's not what he does. He scours and finds every piece, and he lays it out in front of himself. He puts it back together, but he puts it back in a new way with gold. And that golden, veiny place, the places where we were broken, that's what people actually see first and see as beautiful. And those are the things that are now stronger, more valuable, and really beautiful. And so we're able to carry something again. We can hold his story again, but if we're willing to be vulnerable and show the places where we broke, and we are willing to carry him, he's going to give us people that we can share with who maybe haven't yet had that hope. They haven't yet gotten to that place. And so our stories not only are redemptive, but they're valuable in helping other people heal.
Mhm.
And as for those people who are listening, and I know you're out there, so I talk to you a lot, who think their story is boring because they've always known God.
Mm,
Guess what? That's the kind of story that would have given me so much hope when I was young.
mm,
That's the kind of story that when I found out it could really be true, gave me hope that my kids could know God without having to go through what I went through. And they did. They grew up to know Jesus and love him. So every story has a place and a purpose.
mhm. And I like what you said earlier on, that God prepared you, even at NYU and other things, through your parents, through your experiences, for the time you would meet Jesus, and then he would redeem all those things.
Mhm.
Remind me, I just reread the biography of Oswald Chambers, who wrote My Utmost for His Highest. And did you know that he died at 43?
Yeah.
And I read his biography when I was 43. So I thought, Lord, is this my year to go be with you? No, I'm 73. So no, I made it this far. But his wife,
Mhm.
one who wrote My Utmost for his Highest, because she had studied shorthand in 1911. And so she could take shorthand notes because they didn't
Yep.
have tape recorders.
Yep.
And so it was a hidden talent, perhaps, just like you were talking about.
Mhm.
But God redeemed the whole hard situation through her
Mhm.
talent and training. How can, I guess you already answered this, how can a listener feel confident that her story is worth telling?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we need to do is purposefully take time with intention to sit with God and ask and look, right? Because here's what happens. I go all the way back to childhood in my book and also on my podcast every week because we skip over things. We forget things or we did not know where God was during particular times. And we didn't see the people he peppered in. We didn't see the good things that came out of it. We
Right.
didn't see the themes
So
or the
true.
threads. Yeah, and so what happens when you intentionally go back and you ask him to show you and you listen and you journal and you think and you write it down, you start to see these things in your story that are so important, they're so valuable, and most of the time you've missed a lot of those nuggets and gems along the way. You were either too overwhelmed with what was happening in the moment or you didn't fully understand because God's telling the story from up here, from this big place of Kairos time, and we're in this Chronos time, and it's very different. He's already gone ahead. He's been with us all the way through. He was there before we ever existed, and so we can't fully comprehend what he's doing. I like to say he takes all the individual stories, right, of all of the kids that are alive at one time and he works the most good for the most of his children all at one time. And so there's more going on than just your story. He wants to use, like you were just saying with Oswald Chambers, he wants to use your story to intersect with other people's stories. Telling your story is how you go into all the world.
Oh, it's so true. So he uses, repeat this because I want to write down, use your stories to what? To tell his,
Intersect
yeah,
with other people, not only carrying his story, I feel like our stories are like every page is like an Ebenezer stone, right? We're just
right.
showing people his character and his goodness and where he showed up and how he showed up. And here's the thing, years ago, when I first became a Christian and I was reading in Revelation where it says, you overcome by the word of your testimony and by the blood of the Lamb. I was a writer at that point, and I said, wait a minute, this makes no sense. Why are they parallel? Like the blood of the lamb should be way up here, and the word of my testimony should be way down here. And God said, Amanda, there are people who are not going to read the Bible. They're not going to go to church, but they will listen to your story. So I pour the blood of the lamb through the word of your testimony. And I think that is what he does with all of us who know him.
Have you had the experience of telling your story to someone who'd never been to church and they came to know Jesus?
I have, as a matter of fact, and you'll read this in the book. It's one of the stories included. I actually was able to invite my ex-husband to church, and I discipled his wife. They all came to Christ, and they all got baptized, and we all went to church together.
Amazing.
I know. Look at God.
There's so
Now
many.
that's because God told me to pray for them.
Yeah.
When I first came to Christ, I was praying for family, and He said, "You missed some people," and He
Oh,
pointed it
wow.
out. Yeah.
I
But
love
he changed my heart as I prayed for them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember a friend who was betrayed by her husband, and one day she said, "Sue, I need you to pray for me." And I go, "What for this time?" And she said, "I'm having my ex-husband's new wife for lunch." I said, and why would you do that? She goes, because God told me to.
Mhm.
And she
Yeah.
listened just like you did. And that's part of your story as well.
Mhm.
Even as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, oh, this person needs to be on your podcast. They would really be a great guest. Remind me to
Mhm.
tell you who later.
I will.
Um, you say you've been set free from the ties that bound you for most of your life.
Mhm.
How did you meet Jesus and do the short version? And how
Mhm.
does he continue to transform your life?
Okay. Short version is I grew up going to church, only went as long as I lived in my parents' home, never knew that I could know Jesus, never understood the Holy Spirit, thought God was a mean old man for
Oh,
many reasons because he didn't come and save me from a lot of things that happened. So I didn't think he was who everyone said he was.
wow.
So I met Jesus. I'm going to be 62 in May, and I will have met him 25 years ago in May. So do the math.
And
Didn't have him in my life.
I'm an English major, so I can't do the math, but I'll figure it out.
And I was in my home. I was not going to church. I was not reading the Bible. I literally had a thought. And the quickest way I can say is to make it visual. That's the way I am, right? So imagine you're watching a film and somebody has a thought and they're trying to convince themselves it's a good thought, but it actually was a little bit selfish. And then they hear this voice challenge them that, hey, that was actually not good. And they agree. And in the moment they agree, right? All of a sudden they agreed and everything went black. And I realized that I was at the bottom of this pit
Mm,
and I couldn't reach the walls. There were no walls. There was no way up, and I realized how alone and far away from everything I was. I really can't describe it in any other way.
mm,
And I looked up, and there was a little bit of light at the top. And as I looked up, I saw this head come over. It was Jesus, his face. And before I knew it, he was down there with me,
yeah.
and he had picked me up and he took me to the top, and I'll never forget because I felt it with all of my senses at bare feet. And I remember feeling my feet touch the warm ground. It was warm from the sun up there. And we began to walk away. He put his arm around me and he didn't say a word at first. He just held me close. And then after we walked for a little while, and I could feel everything had changed. I could feel peace. I could feel love, joy, all those things. And as we walked away, eventually he turned to me and he looked at me. I cry every time I say it. I'm going to try really hard. And he said, "Daughter, I've been waiting for you for so long.
Mm,
Welcome home." And I have never stopped talking about him since. I spend every minute that I can reading the word, studying the word, worshiping God, being as much as I can in presence of God, praying for other people, and just asking him what he wants me to do. I literally, in Romans, it says, I offer you back my life as a living sacrifice. What do you want to do with it? I'll do whatever you ask.
mm,
Because I know what it felt like to be dead, and I know what it feels like to be alive.
mm. I wonder
I
why it was at that time that
mm,
it was Jesus who came through that hole. I mean, it could have been something else or someone else.
mhm, mhm.
Or just-
At the time, I was in my second marriage.
Mhm,
It was a week before my husband at the time started showing signs of being bipolar and started becoming a pretty horrible alcoholic. So, what I believe is that God is constantly trying to get our attention, constantly trying to get us to understand that He's there. But for whatever reason, I grew up hearing the word. I do know that there were lots of seeds in my heart that began rooting and sprouting at the time that I accepted him that had been there because his word does not come back void without accomplishing what he sends it to do. But I think at that moment, I was finally ready to hear the truth and I agreed with him, and that's all it took.
mm,
I look back now and knowing Christ, when I look back, I call them glimmers. I can see all these places where he was there. I
mhm.
just didn't know.
Which goes along with what you were saying that we need to sit before God and quietly begin to notice uh,
Mhm,
and notice how he's helped us all along the way. I had a big struggle this week with something, and as it was playing out, not completely resolved, I started noticing, oh, it was because that person in Tennessee happened to Marco Polo me and told me this little story. Talk about
mhm,
story that gave
mhm.
me courage to do the next thing. That was
Yeah.
one little thing, but then someone else texted me about something else, and then I happened to call a friend, and it all wove together because God is a giant, big weaver, and He knows what's best for us. but we
That's right.
need to be listening. As Oswald Chambers said, it's not when we the fact that we don't hear God, it has to do with the state of our ears. It has nothing to do with God. He might
Mhm.
be using a megaphone, as C.S. Lewis says. He uses our pain as the megaphone to get our attention. And I think that's where you were. And that was a
Mhm.
megaphone, but he doesn't yell. He draws us, he draws us gently, and praise God for that. Tell us,
Yeah.
you've already told us about your book a little bit, Holy Plot Twist. I love the
Mhm.
title. God is
Thank
still writing your story and how it offers hope to everyone. And by the way, if I forget to mention later, Amanda is generously giving away a copy. So be sure to comment on social media or in my newsletter. You can always email me and say, I'd like this book, and we'll enter your name for the giveaway. So tell us a
you.
little bit about this book.
Before I do want to just say when we were just talking about hearing God, there's something that I say often, and I feel like I'm supposed to share it here. So if you were to draw a line and you were to put a bunch of dots on it and say that was the times that you heard God were the dots,
Mm,
we might assume that those are the times God spoke. But God is the line, and the dots are when we have taken the time to pay attention and attune ourselves to listen. And so really our job is to get as many dots on that line as we can for the rest of our life.
yeah.
But I just, it's such a great visual because I think a lot of times we convince ourselves he only speaks when we hear him, and that's not true. And he speaks in ways that are very creative and different than just just in his word, or just in prayer, or just when we're sitting and worshiping him. He uses his creation. And so I just want people to know, like, if you really do notice, you stop trying to limit how he speaks,
Mm.
and don't convince yourself that everything that you hear isn't him. If it lines up with scripture and it does all those great connections you were just talking about for other people, like, allow yourself to see when it's him.
I love
um
that you call it the God is the line. And he is called the Word in John 1. Out of
yeah.
all the different descriptions God could have given his son,
Hmm.
it could be anything. It could be sword, it could be power, but he gave word. And so being
Hmm.
able to listen to his word and recognize that it's his word is such a great gift. I mean, how do people go through things in this life without being able to listen to God, be comforted by him, and be
Hmm.
strengthened for the next step ahead? Now,
Yeah.
I know your book is near and dear to your heart.
Mhm.
Quickly give us a summary.
Sure. So actually, the book itself was a holy plot twist. I started using that phrase while podcasting, when I started noticing God would come in, take one story that looked this way and flip it around, and it would look another way. It's like that in the Bible, and it's like that in our lives. And what happened was, I was actually very busy taking care of my father. I already had an international podcast I was doing that I did not expect to do, that I was doing all that work. And I had two collaborative books that I was a part of that I was writing chapters for. And one day I heard God say, put everything aside and start working on this other thing, which made absolutely no sense. But the more I prayed about it, the more I knew it was true. So that is what I did. What he wanted me to do was, basically, I felt like he said, Amanda, you've been a really good steward over 5 years sharing people's stories. I want all the stories to go out there because they're really important, but we need more people to do it. Not enough people are sharing. I always feel like it's like he's trying to cast a net over the world, and it's made up of stories, and there are these holes in the net because people aren't sharing their story.
Mm,
Not that they don't know the value always, but sometimes they don't feel like they're the one to do it, or they don't know how to do it. And so basically what he wanted me to do was to take the podcast and to put it in book form. So in my podcast, I start in your childhood and work up to what you're doing now. And I do a pre-recording call where we really get to know one another. I ask a lot of questions and hit some of those places people skip over, like inevitably at some point someone says, oh, and then I was in high school. And you're like, no, 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 wait a minute. And those questions that might seem very
blase.
yeah, they're really pivotal to opening up these memories and showing us places where God was.
Mm,
So what ended up happening is I wrote the first part's memoir, and it's my story from childhood up until now, mixed with biblical stories. both together, mingling in a way that brings the reader in to feel they're really part of everything going on, and to show how God works like that. And then in the end is a interactive journal made up of questions I've learned to ask people over the past 5 years in doing this process. What happened was, like I said, he said, put everything aside. It's super urgent. So I started working on it. Ended up having somebody come on the podcast as a guest, and they were coming on. I was helping a friend by having them on who was doing a book, and they asked me, and I said, sure. This person came on. I did not even know that they were an acquisitions editor. We went through the whole thing. She had an amazing story. Next thing I know, we finished recording, and she said, oh, are you working on anything? I said, one sentence. Yeah, weirdest thing. God said, put everything aside, and I'm doing something brand new. What is it? And I said, oh, it's kind of like a book version of the podcast. And she said, well, when you finish the book proposal, send it to me. And I thought, I got off and I thought, okay, I can't go to conferences because I'm taking care of my dad. I can't do it. I'm not even trying. God said this is urgent. This has got to be God. So I power wrote it in like 3 weeks. They normally take about 6 months to write,
Sure.
sent it off to her. And I thought, all right, I'll hear from her in a couple of months. Same day.
Wow.
I would like to set up a Zoom call. And I thought, you know what? She's a really nice lady. And
Sweet.
she's going to be like, oh, sweetheart, it's just not quite ready or whatever. I wanted to do it in person. So that's kind of what I had in my mind. I made the appointment. We're having our conversation. And next thing I know, she's telling me how she and her partner want to offer me a traditional contract. And I'm like, oh, and then she said, but we're a small company and we've already acquired the books for the year. So it would have to be, and I'm about to say no because I know God said this urgent, urgent, urgent. And I'm about to say no, wondering what this is all about. She said, but when we prayed about it, God said, make room.
Wow.
Can you have it done by? So this book was, we signed the contract in June of 2024 and it came out April of 2026. It's 10 months. I wrote the whole thing and it came out. That doesn't typically happen. So God brought it, right to me, this opportunity. And I believe the reason I was able to do it is because I jumped in on his timing. I listened to his will. I was obedient to what he asked me to do. And he brought me all the moving parts. Like, how could I not do it? And God has amazed me. I mean, this book has done very well. It's award winning and it's getting great reviews. I'm using it in small groups in people's homes with people, and it's also being used for individual studies. So I'm just flabbergasted by God as usual. And it was an amazing thing. So
Is
I'm enjoying it.
a God worth being flabbergasted at? Why a cup of gratitude? Has your life, obviously not, been always full of joy and blessings forever and ever? Amen. Why a cup of gratitude?
Okay, because some people look at a cup and they say it's half empty, and some say it's half full.
Mhm.
But I say if you find a way to look for the good, that even one little drop of gratitude means more than anything else. The way he made our brains is we have a neural network, and whether we choose good things or bad things, whether we look at blessings or a curse, whichever we choose, it routes this deeper pathway through our mind. And the more you choose something intentionally, so if you choose to look for good, I was doing this during the pandemic, cut off from everything, wanting to share the gospel and stuck in a home where I couldn't do anything. And I said, I miss sharing the gospel. And he said, well, here you go. And I think the point is that if you choose to look for good, and you do it over and over again, eventually you become expectant for good things. And so it's about having the discipline of choosing. Think about it. When you are ready to wake up in the morning, sometimes we wake up, it might not come out of our mouth, but in our mind, you wake up and you think, oh, it's cold. I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to walk the dog or whatever the thing might be. And we can start off having a voice of
Yeah,
complaint.
right.
But I intentionally, before I get out of bed, before my feet hit the floor, I say to myself 3 things I'm thankful for. Then my feet hit the floor, then I get the coffee, then I'm even more thankful, and I continue throughout my day. And you know what? It changes everything.
Mm, that's wonderful. I say, cause me to hear thy loving kindness in the morning, for in thee do I trust. Cause me to know the way wherein I should walk, King James Version. For I lift up my soul unto thee, Psalm 143. 8 before my feet hit the floor, which is kind of the same thing. Caused me to hear thy loving kindness because you're listing 3 things.
Mhm.
What a
Yeah.
blessing. Um, what can you say to encourage us today to live in gratitude when our answers to prayers seem to be on God's back burner?
I would say that although no one enjoys waiting, that God does his best work while we wait.
Mm.
I would say that when we don't hear him or see him moving, we often think he has forgotten. But think about it. Like, when does the GPS talk to you in the car? If you're going the right way, does it say anything? No.
Yeah.
So perhaps it's not time to do something yet. Or did you do the last thing he asked you to do? Because sometimes he'll be quiet because we have not accomplished yet the last thing he asked us to do. And so I think, again, it's a matter of being intentional, sitting down with God, whether you hear him or not, whether it feels like you're getting the answers or not, trusting in who he is, who he's shown himself to be, affirming that that's who he is, and saying, you know what, God, I don't hear you right now, or it doesn't seem like I'm going anywhere, but. And that's what happened when I started the podcast. It was a year of being cut off from everything. And one day I just said, God, I'll do this as long as you have for me. It's not easy, but I know you asked me to do it. But I miss sharing the gospel. That's all I had to say.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
never even listened to a podcast before. And here we are 5 years later.
Wow.
And it's the best thing I never knew I wanted to do. I love it.
That's funny. Um, we are going to go to right now to the legacy questions because you know this is a Living a Legacy podcast. What legacy do you want to pass down to those who know and love you?
Jesus, Jesus, Jesus.
Mhm.
I want people to know that he is real, that he loves them, that he can love them and come alongside them in their life in a way that no person can, that he is exactly who he says that he is. And honestly, that is the number one thing that changed my life. And I don't think it's enough for just me to be free. I want everyone to be free.
Hmm. And how are you? I think I know how you're currently doing that through your podcast and through your writing, and also just taking care of your dad.
Yeah, and then I still do other ministry as well. I do one-on-one mentorship, discipleship. I do small group things. I do women's ministry at church. So any way that he gives me, I pray about each opportunity. Coming on as a guest for your show, anything that he gives me, I have said, like, I want people to know about you. So when he gives me opportunities to do that, my biggest ministry, I really think, is in the quiet that nobody sees, and the opportunities he gives me one-on-one with people. And I think that I have been given, because I didn't have it when I needed it, the ability to make someone feel safe,
Mm.
seen, heard, and loved. And in that quiet connection that's real, people are able to begin to trust and heal and grow. And then those disciples go out and they make disciples who make disciples. And that's really, for me, I think the most important thing, other than my dad. My dad's number one, what is on the front burner. Any of this other platformy stuff is wonderful.
Mhm.
Um, but none of it is anything I planned. I think it's an overflow of me being obedient in the behind closed doors things he asked me to do.
Mhm.
Um, and I had to get over myself. I think you know what that's like. Like, I don't really want to see myself on video. I don't really want to hear okay, well, people need to hear that you know me, and they need to see the peace and the joy and the things that people can't make up, and they're out there. I'm on every kind of everything you think of, TikTok and YouTube and all the things, and people are longing to know that God is real. They're longing for Jesus. They really are.
Um, how does your life embody God's welcome?
I definitely have a spirit of hospitality. I think God took my negative, broken, people pleasing part of my past and turned it into a spirit of hospitality. I'm a scooper upper. I'm constantly making sure people are connected. Not that everyone needs to be connected with me, but if there's somewhere that they can be connected that they're not yet, I I'm very aware of people. I notice the person that has no one to talk to. I know the person, if I see them that's maybe kind of off by themselves, and I think it's super important to welcome them in. even everything in my home, everything has to be cozy and pretty. And, I just feel it's part of everything that I do. I want people to know they're loved and that they're welcome. And so it really plays itself out in every part of my life.
Um, I had a question. No, I lost it. I want people to know they are seen, known, and loved.
Seen, heard, known, and loved. Yeah.
Heard, known, and loved. This has been great, and what an encouragement. Now, if someone would say, "Oh, she's just a Pollyanna," she's just saying that the glass is half full when it's really half empty. What do you say to that Eeyore person? Because I have Eeyore people in my life.
I was Eeyore more years than I wasn't. I would say that if you really want to know my story, spend some time with me, reach out to me by email or whatever. I'd be happy to talk with you. But you could also read the book if you want to, but no pressure. But it has a lot of the transformation in it. I would say that I know what that feels like, and I didn't believe that there was any other way.
Oh,
And I agree with you. I know it's really hard sometimes. It's not about me saying everything's great. It's about me saying that when I'm in a bad circumstance, and they still happen, even as healed as I am and as mature in Christ as I am now, when a bad circumstance happens, I invite peace in. Peace is Jesus. Peace is not a circumstance, it's a person. When I invite Jesus into my circumstance, it's okay, only because he's with me. I might still have to walk out how hard it is. I'm not saying everything is wonderful all the time. I'm saying be intentional about what your reaction is to the world and do it with Jesus.
I like that
Makes it
potential. And you do have to, it's not just like girding up your loins, but kind of is where you're saying, I'm choosing to trust you, God, even though I don't see a good end to this situation.
yeah,
Also, the older and more mature we get, we realize how we have no control over people or circumstances. We barely
yeah,
have control over our mouths, but
yeah,
that's about it. And
yeah,
we have control about how we spend our time and how we spend our time in intercessory prayer, which is really our biggest
yeah.
weapon and
Mhm.
help to somebody else. And Oswald Chambers did say, and the reason I'm quoting him so much is because I was on an interview about 3 hours ago about Oswald Chambers. So
There
it's
you go.
fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite statements of his is that all the questions of the world can be answered in these words, come unto me and find rest. And that's what you
Mhm,
did, Amanda. Jesus called you and you heard
mhm,
him during a dire situation and said yes. And he
mhm,
has not only encompassed you with forgiveness and favor and joy, he's given you a passion for souls, and that
mhm.
pleases him so much. And I rejoice in our new friendship. And I'm going to send
Okay.
you my book too, because it's all about stories. So
Yeah.
thank you, Amanda, and God bless you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. I don't see where it says to turn off. Hmm.
Normally it's down on the bottom.
I know. It says recording, more, record.
I heard it say it started recording.